cold, dreary night when I decided to take a shortcut through the park on my way home from work. I know I shouldn't have, but it was late, and I just wanted to get home as fast as possible. The park was empty and dark, the only light coming from a few scattered street lamps. I picked up my pace, hoping to get through quickly. That's when I first noticed him behind me. I couldn't make out any details, just a silhouette of someone walking at a distance. I told myself I was being paranoid and kept going, but soon I heard his footsteps getting faster too, as if he was trying to catch up to me. My heart started racing. I looked back again and could see the outline of a tall, lanky man in a long coat. He seemed to walk awkwardly, almost like he was limping. I decided to cross the street to put some distance between us, then slowed my pace so he'd walk past me. But as soon as I crossed, he changed direction and followed me. Now I was really freaked out. I started rummaging through my bag for my pepper spray, but couldn't find it in my panic. The man was getting closer. I made a snap decision to cut through the trees to try and lose him. Darting off the path, I pushed through branches that scratched my arms and legs. I didn't dare look back, just kept running blindly through the dark woods. Sweat dripped down my forehead despite the cold. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop. Finally, I saw lights ahead, signaling the edge of the park. I burst out of the trees in relief, only to smack straight into something solid. I screamed, certain it was my pursuer who had somehow headed me off. But then a voice exclaimed, "Hey, watch it." I blinked in surprise to see it wasn't the creepy man, but just a normal guy walking his dog. He gave me a weird look as I muttered an apology, my heart still racing. I glanced back at the dark woods behind me, but saw no one. The limping man in the long coat had vanished. I shakily thanked the dog walker and continued home, constantly checking over my shoulder. But the rest of my walk was uneventful. Still, I couldn't shake the terrifying experience. Who was that man? Why did he chase me? What would have happened if I hadn't lost him in the woods? Maybe he was just a harmless weirdo, but something about him filled me with instinctual dread. I couldn't stop replaying those harrowing moments in the park, when I was isolated and hunted in the darkness. I vowed to never take that shortcut again, especially at night, and I started carrying pepper spray on me at all times, just in case. For weeks, I found myself randomly looking around whenever I went out, afraid I might see that ominous figure with the limp again. The encounter was a sobering reminder that there are dangerous people in this world, and they can pursue you even in everyday places you think are safe. Now I make sure to stay alert and aware of my surroundings, even on routine errands. I don't listen to music or get distracted walking alone anymore. And I learned to trust my gut when something feels off. Intuition is there to protect you. Of course, I hope I never have such a close call again. But if I do, at least I'm prepared and know to get away quickly. Nothing good can come from engaging with a predator. Though it's been months since that night in the park, it still gives me chills thinking what nearly happened. I barely escaped a potential nightmare. The mystery man almost got me, but something caused him to give up the chase. I don't want to imagine what twisted plans he had if he caught me alone in the dark. It sends a shudder down my spine. I'm just grateful I listened to my instincts and got away from him when I did. That fateful night was a harrowing reminder to be wary of strangers. You never know who might be lurking out there in the shadows, following you, and their intentions are likely far more sinister than you can imagine. It was a Monday night like any other. I had just gotten home from work and was looking forward to relaxing after a long day. As I walked up to my apartment, I noticed something strange. The welcome mat by my front door was slightly askew. That's weird, I thought. I'm usually pretty OCD about keeping it straight. I fixed the mat and let myself inside, immediately hitting the lights. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I went about my normal routine, changing into comfy clothes and putting on the TV for background noise. But I felt uneasy, like I was being watched. I double-checked all the locks on my doors and windows. Everything seemed secure. You're being paranoid, I told myself. Still, I couldn't ignore the prickly feeling on the back of my neck. Deciding to make some tea to calm my nerves, I went into the kitchen. As I waited for the water to boil, I heard a creaking sound coming from down the hall. I froze, listening closely. There it was. Again, the distinct noise of a floorboard squeaking under pressure. Someone was in my apartment. My heart started pounding. I frantically looked around for something to use to defend myself. Grabbing a heavy skillet from the stove, I slowly crept down the hall. The creaking was coming from my bedroom. Taking a deep breath, I counted to 3 and then burst through the door, ready to strike. My bedroom was empty. Everything looked undisturbed, but I swore I heard footsteps. I searched every inch of that room before determining it must have been my imagination. Thoroughly rattled, I decided to spend the night at a friend's place. I packed a bag and got ready to leave. The feeling of being watched returned as soon as I stepped outside my apartment. The parking lot was dimly lit and deserted at this late hour. I couldn't shake the sense that someone was lurking in the shadows. Hurrying to my car, I fumbled for my keys with shaky hands. Just as I grabbed the door handle, I heard footsteps rapidly approaching from behind. Adrenaline spiked through my veins. I whipped around, swinging my bag at my attacker. A man stumbled back, narrowly avoiding the blow. He seemed stunned that I had fought back. Seizing the opportunity, I jumped into my car and peeled out of the parking lot. My heart was still slamming against my ribs when I got to my friend's place. I could barely get the words out to explain what happened. Over the next few days, I hardly left my friend's apartment. I was terrified that my stalker would track me down, but I knew I couldn't hide forever. When I finally returned home, the feeling of being watched clung to me like a second skin. I didn't know if I was being paranoid or if hidden eyes were following my every move. Things escalated a week later. I was taking out the trash late at night when I heard footsteps behind me. Before I could react, someone grabbed me from behind, clamping a hand over my mouth. I bit down hard until I tasted blood, and my attacker cried out in pain, loosening his grip. I spun around to face a tall man in a black hoodie, the same one who had attacked me in the parking lot. This time, I wasn't letting him get away. I screamed as loud as I could, hoping to attract attention. The man slammed me against the wall, knocking the wind out of me. I gasped for breath as his hands closed around my throat. As my vision started to go dark, I heard shouting. Someone was coming. My attacker cursed and took off running. I sank to the ground, coughing and wheezing. A few of my neighbors had heard my screams and come rushing to help. They insisted on calling the police to report what happened. I knew this wasn't over. That man would keep coming back unless he was caught. Over the following weeks, I hardly slept. I jumped at every little noise, positive that I was still being stalked. But as time passed with no further incidents, I finally started to relax and feel safe again. I made sure to take precautions just in case, keeping my pepper spray on me at all times and varying my routine so I was never predictable. I'm thankful every day that things didn't end up worse. But I will never forget the terror of almost losing my life or the feeling of unseen eyes tracking my every move. That chilling experience left me permanently changed, always aware of my surroundings and wary of the dangers lurking in the shadows. I was lucky to escape. Next time, I might not be so fortunate. It was a cold, dreary night when it happened. I was walking home after a late shift at work, just trying to get back to my apartment as quickly as possible. Even though it was only 9 p.m., the streets were deserted. An eerie fog had rolled in, reducing visibility to barely a few feet in front of me. I felt an involuntary shiver run down my spine as I walked briskly down the sidewalk. This was not my usual route home, but I had decided to take a shortcut through a more run-down part of the neighborhood. I was beginning to regret that decision. Out of nowhere, I heard a noise behind me. It sounded like footsteps. I quickly glanced over my shoulder, but saw nothing through the thick fog. My heart began to pound. I picked up my pace, cursing myself for not calling a cab. The footsteps behind me also seemed to quicken. I was being followed. Panic set in as I broke into a jog, then an all-out run. The footsteps pursued me, heavy and steady. I didn't dare look back again. I just ran as fast as my legs could carry me through the darkness. My lungs burned. Veering sharply, I turned down an alleyway, hoping to lose my pursuer. But the footsteps rounded the corner seconds after me. Whoever this was, they were not giving up. I was rapidly running out of energy. Up ahead, I spotted a recessed doorway in the alley and made a split-second decision. Ducking into the doorway, I pressed myself against the wall, trying to slow my ragged breathing. The footsteps approached steadily, then stopped right in front of my hiding spot. Through the fog, I could make out the silhouette of a large figure looming menacingly just feet away. Several agonizing seconds passed as the figure stood there motionless. Then a hand emerged from the figure's side, clutching an object that glinted in the dim light. A knife. I recoiled in horror, but did not dare move a muscle. After what felt like an eternity, the figure slowly turned and continued down the alley, the footsteps fading away. I sagged against the wall, dizzy with relief. That was way too close for comfort. As my panic subsided, I felt an icy chill creep down my back. I had come within inches of being attacked, or worse. If I had chosen to run just a few seconds later or picked a different hiding spot, I could very well be lying in that alley right now, my life bleeding out onto the pavement. A few simple twists of fate had been the difference between escaping unharmed and becoming another tragic victim. I finally stumbled out of my hiding place on trembling legs, my whole body shaking from the shock and adrenaline. I no longer cared about getting home quickly. All I wanted was to get as far away from that alley as possible. I walked the long way, constantly glancing behind me, half expecting the shadowy figure to reappear. But the streets remained empty. When I finally reached my apartment, I locked the door securely behind me and collapsed onto my bed. As the terror of my close call slowly faded, it was replaced by a lingering unease. I knew I would be looking over my shoulder for weeks, if not longer. You never forget an encounter like that. Even though I had escaped unscathed, the knife-wielding killer remained etched in my memory, a reminder of how close I had come to death in that dark, foggy alley. My hands still shake when I think about it now. That night changed me forever, and not for the better. The world seems a lot more dangerous now.